Welcome to the first literary salon of 1 Week Critique. And tonight's featured readers are Jessica Guzman and Sandra Simonds. 1 Week Critique is an Iowa-based arts and education nonprofit that offers educational resources and editorial support to students and teachers of the literary arts. You can learn more about us and our programs or support our work by visiting our website, oneweekcritique.com. That's the number oneweekcritique.com. Please like and subscribe to help us continue producing excellent content. Our first reader tonight, Jessica Guzman, was born in Southwest Florida to Cuban exiles. She is the author of Adelante, Switchback Books 2020, selected by Patricia Smith as winner of the 2019 Gatewood Prize. Her poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Shenandoah, Jubilat, 32 Poems, Copper Nickel, Dialogist, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, and elsewhere. Her honors include American Literary Review's Poetry Award, Harper Pellet's Milton Kessler Memorial Prize for Poetry, and the Product Poetry Prize. She is also the recipient of scholarships from the Tin House Winter Workshop, Poetry Workshop at the Community of Writers, and the Kentucky Women Writers Conference. Her degrees include a BA from the University of South Florida, MFA from West Virginia University, and PhD from the University of Southern Mississippi's Center for Writers. She chairs poetry and poetry studies for the Mid-Atlantic Popular and American Culture Association and serves on the masthead of Memorious, a journal of new verse and fiction, having previously worked for Split Lip Magazine, Mississippi Review, Cheat River Review, and Vita, Women in Literary Arts. She is an assistant professor of English and creative writing at Widener University, where she coordinates the creative writing program and lives in Philadelphia. And I would also add that Jessica's poem, Ode at the Hospital, was one of our teaching takeaways. I believe it was December of 2021. So feel free to check that out as well. And take it away, Jessica.
Thanks, Jon. Thanks so much for kind of reading my bio and for all of your work organizing the reading. And also thanks to Adam, Matthew, and Ingrid, all of 1 Week's Critique staff. I will do my own plug for 1 Week Critique, which is that I really love what y'all do. And especially as someone who likes to teach, I love bringing in all of your interviews to students and giving them a chance to kind of, have all of these other writers' voices in the room with them as they're thinking about their own work. So thank you to 1 Week Critique for all of the stuff that y'all do, because it's really great. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of read a combination of work from Adelante and a few other poems that are somewhat newer since then. It'll just be a little bit of a mix. So Adelante is kind of, in some ways, it's just a book about like several years in my life. And in some ways, it's also a book about kind of my father getting sick and passing away and being from the state of Florida and thinking about like climate anxiety and tourism and, all of those things. So I'm going to go ahead and start by reading a few of these poems. Florida Orange. Orange I lift to my lips. Orange I glimpse roadside. Hibiscus and bird of paradise. Florida's natural discarded below orange slip of sky. Orange jumpsuit that kindled my brother's complexion thrice. Orange visitor signs. Live where you vacation. After no outlet and short-term parking, turn right. At the market, 10 items or less only at the orange checkout light. At the hospital, oncology and hematology follow the orange line. 3 weeks after chemo, I don't recognize my father in the orange cap, so I enter his room twice. Once, quick to anger, he says nothing but tugs on the lidless Tropicana straw, juice spackling the Pall Mall I never lit on the drive. Like the time years ago in a Home Depot, porcelain tile, the most perfect orange I ever saw. I never heard my father ask if I wanted a Happy Meal before our last stop, to drop the last chlorine tablet in the last snowbird's pool. And when my mother asked that night, I didn't deny his broken English embarrassed me, though I didn't know why she asked, her fingers tight around the orange neck of Orange Pine Sol, now discontinued. Orange joke on the popsicle dripping down my hand. Orange, you glad it's summer? My father rubbing his knees in our future life. Orange sun eye level through a glass. Orange flash, orange rain. Say the devil's daughter marries days like these. Orange meal schedule my brother turns over. Orange paper peeking from his pocket. My father in the hospital recliner, rolling oranges across the TV tray toward me. Orange slit I split. Orange slice I bite hard, hold the sour under my tongue. Reminder. I crushed Katydid and the ant shell girding it, and the gold-plated plaque in the hospital garden. If you're a dreamer, come in. Mother said arrangements in Spanish, but I heard remember, shook my head. You'd think insects were a promise of spring. Then it snows instead. Beautifully, damn it. She wanted to know, and I couldn't say it wasn't a miracle, how orderly nature disposes the dead. Around the time that my father was kind of in the hospital and was kind of slowly passing away, as people with cancer often do, I moved a couple of times for graduate school, and I somehow ended up twice living right next to a cemetery, which, of course, I'm a poet, so that had to be symbolic in some way. But also, it was just kind of strange, because it was kind of strange to have this other location that I lived right next to that other people regularly visited for their own very intimate reasons, and I just happened to be there. And so this poem is a little bit about that, alongside thinking about kind of death and nature and all of these things. This is conservation status. The Doppler shows an apricot wave crown the bay's little mouth. My mother sorting my father's clothes. Where manatees might drop to threaten, the radio reports. Her phone won't load the weather, and won't I read her the map? In second grade science, when we charted the scabs and blisters of the zoo porpoise, she swears she only called because he never wore those Snoopy pajamas. Dr. Florida Wildlife says we keep count by drawing scars. 2 apartments in 2 states in 2 years, neighboring cemeteries. Her phone won't load the weather. I'm stuck again following a funeral procession home. For this next poem, there was a news report a few years ago about a woman who kind of got lost on this tour, and everyone was looking for her. And then it turned out that the woman wasn't lost, that she was still there and didn't realize she was the person they were looking for. And so I kind of wrote a poem inspired by that news headline titled "Woman Unwittingly Joined Search Party Looking for Her." All day in the bus window, her face reflected the misted chasm, a sweat-marked jaw. So she swapped windbreaker and full slacks at the service stop. The driver's miscount, The passengers whispered descriptors. 160 centimeters, black shawl, crescendoed across the canyon. I like to think I'd know quickly, match myself first against the inevitable call. Is it fabricate or reconstruct when we daydream ourselves into others? 3 days from death, my father moaned a sound like my name and pulled out his feeding tube, hand steady above the obsidian mouth where I leaned my ear. All right, I'm going to read one more poem from Adelante. This one is called Register of Futures Florida, which is kind of what it sounds like. I just imagined several possible futures that my home state, the state of Florida, might experience. Register of Futures. 1. The limestone crevasse, like stale bread and phosphogypsum butter. One drawn gulp under a power plant. How the mangroves faint into her jaws. Butterfly kiss the aquifer. From plains tourists huzzah, our own moon crater. Grip their polyurethane backrests to follow the fishing boats' diminishing arabesques, and the stadium seats sneaking in behind them. Fiberglass frames return the sun's glare. 2. The tide advances. Signposts and bicycle spokes incarnadined. Coral usurps the chained pens of bank teller stalls, where barnacles crumb the vaults, like meadows pursue bloom in schoolyards. Wrapped in seaweed, swings and monkey bars become truss for lost architecture. Scientists take note as their robots compass the decomposed grocery cart, screening a Tonka truck, a small moray peeking from the cab. 3. A symbol for a symbol. The concrete trees with their carved animals and polyethylene leaves. Perennial summer vacation. The ad hoc forests and plains. The Everglades, the swamps, where the croc receives Captain Hook 7 noons a week. Autocade of volcanoes. Canoe rides on chlorinated seas. Where children swallow Slurpees, strawless for animal safety. 4. A quake's bellyache. Then the peninsula archipelagos into blue sea. Attendant cloud rings her halo, the islands weld. Veladoras and macaroni packs unveiled behind a toppled wall. The crescent wave, afterthought, where terrariums boast beer tin homes. Continental fragments keep their sobriquet, and the old expan splinters to steeple 4 quarters. Her human cohort, unknowable in the brew. So I'm going to switch away from Adelante and towards some other poems that I've written since and that are kind of part of a new project that is still taking shape, but will also probably somehow encompass several years of my life. And this first poem is called Recycled and Recyclable, and it's actually a found poem. And every single line I found from, all sorts of different places that, had to do with things that could somehow kind of be used and recycled in some way. Recycled and recyclable. Make your own rabbit ashtray. Squirrel footrest with pumice stone attachment. Hold 2 items at once. Fossils chisel-tipped in low-odor ink. On woolens and wood finishes, set and refresh the faces. Under certain circumstances ignited by persistent or chronic contact. Love at first touch. With the creation of parkways, monuments, every American continues to eat his own eyeball. Like hair stripped of natural oils, such as occurs even without animal-derived ingredients. Rendered here in light, the generous lather leaves your dog smelling so good you might not want to let go. After Expo 67, Man and His World. Papula polyhedron. Geodesic adjunct. Jutting from graves, over which actors, who cannot say greetings but grin, the down-filled coats and wool costumes, aggregate with the deteriorating country's pavilions. Season visas, no longer the price of admission. Purview of the state, in which to sustain has always been to hold soil in one fist. Fabricate in the other keepsakes. Photograph children large enough to lay arms around a future already relinquished. By those imploring you, look here, smile. Post-storm assessment. I spray X on my front door. I set the table, plastic on plastic, secured by stone. 2 days after the hurricane, I grill freezer-burnt flanks and elbow bread, sink candles in the split ends of Entenmann jelly rolls. All dogs attend. I shovel sargassum from the den. Apologize excess is the only thing left. Late, the landlord arrives for wine and go fish. He wins. A dog growls when he vomits into a Santa hat, red into red. I offer to call a cab. Down the sidewalk, the landlord says, my leases don't allow pets. Cypress shoots stuck to my legs. I gather banana leaves from the bed, switch kerosene for flashlight, strobe over the dog's dream pedal and the crunch of my own steps. It's hard enough to name the beetle in the plum pit while juice shoots down your chin. I peel off skin, the carapace of another shedding season glutting my heel. Mississippi Snow Day. There is the tire, and there's the rope, and there is the oak, and there's the snow, burdening the branch into a mouth. What sounds distant, but collects in the creases of your coat. Or, loud as a freight train to fish, physicists claim, of the flakes whose trapped air blares underwater. In other words, an account for what they think they know. There is the roundabout and the shout, and the shotgun house, lights out. There is the trout souring the skillet flung through the door, steam sighs from the pores. There is the neighbor on their porch, ear angled toward the rocker's sudden sway. There is the diminuendo grease splatters just below the windowsill's display of mosquito dividends. And the silk scaffolding of a cobweb stretched corner to corner. From there, a spider spins and plucks, feels the throne plate's applause. This next poem is an elegy, and one of the kind of unfortunate things I think about knowing a lot of people and having gone to school with a lot of people who were artists or poets or writers in some way, or who were really deeply interested in and affected by literature, and perhaps the product of graduate school itself, is that I have several friends that have unfortunately taken their own lives. And so one of the things that I was kind of thinking about with this particular poem, which I did write for one particular person, but I was kind of thinking about, what it is to kind of have multiple people that you knew in such a similar way kind of make this choice and have this happen. Elegy with wing dance. You think you know. Walk across asphalt willingly. Toes pinched, but you don't remember that part. I don't know the last time I saw you. If I answered yesterday, you could have replied. If I step outside, 1,000 ants will make a mosaic of my face. If the mirror is too much or not enough of itself after it shatters. And I'm going to go ahead and end with this poem, which is kind of a poem reflecting on, drug use and family and kind of fortunes, and what it is to kind of feel like you have a premonition or you somehow have seen the future. And the title runs right into the poem. At SeaWorld, Sea Lion, and Otter Stadium, your brother says, the dog is dead. Your mother stands at the start of the aisle, hand to ear, eyes traversing the bleachers' hurrahs. The sea lions raise flippers in response. It is too soon to tell who calls, who denies, who decides to bury the ash, but you are 12 and trying to stop crying in public, so you don't turn your head from the pool's edge, where shade stops and light bounces off a sea lion's whirligig. Call it mindfulness or luck, how he knows, and won't remember years later when you bring it up behind the pawn shop on 14th and Fowler, car idling, sunshine knitting your lashes, and the catfish rotting 2 parking spaces beyond. Behind you, your brother retches on his socks while you twirl napkins, scrape the tar swirled in the rococo of his spoon stem. The precision of your tenderness. The sea lion enclosure is smallest in the procession of Boeing 747, football field, Walmart parking lot. So they say, but you don't need to look to know a fortune like knowledge can be stolen. Curl smarting your cheeks, thigh stuck to your seat. You believe. You are memory like a thief. Thank you.
Great job, Jessica. Thank you for your words. It's wonderful. Our next reader is Sandra Simonds, the award-winning author of 8 books of poetry, Triptychs from Wave Books, 2022, Utopia, Wesleyan University Press, 2019, Orlando from Wave Books, 2018, Further Problems with Pleasure, winner of the 2015 Akron Poetry Prize from the University of Akron Press, Steal It Back, Saturnalia Books, 2015. The Sonnets, Bloof Books, 2014. Mother Was a Tragic Girl, Cleveland State University Poetry Center, 2012, and Warsaw Bikini, Bloof Books, 2009. I also have a little tour of some of my Sandra Simonds books. And it's great that we also have the 11 Triptychs with poems by Sandra Simonds and Ink and Salt by Summer J. Hart, who is in the audience tonight. Her poems and criticism have been published in The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Best American Poetry, The American Poetry Review, The Chicago Review, Granta, Boston Review, Plowshares, Fence, Court Green, and Lana Turner. She is the recipient of the Reader's Choice Award for her sonnet Red Wand, which was also a November 2021 teaching takeaway. And subsequent to that, it was published on poets.org, the Academy of American Poets website. She went to UCLA for her BA, University of Montana for her MFA, and Florida State for her PhD. She lives in Tallahassee, Florida, and is an associate professor of English and Humanities at Thomas University in Thomasville, Georgia, and I believe also does some teaching at Bennington University up in Vermont. Give Sandra Simonds your warmest welcome.
Hi, I guess I should say thank you, Jon. I guess I should say, but thank you, Jon, for that. And it was wonderful hearing you read, Jessica. I'm going to read from my book, Triptychs, and I taught just before this, so I didn't come up with a plan, but except that I wanted to read some poems that I don't generally read for reading. So I thought that would be fun. So we'll see what happens. The thing to know about Triptychs is that they're all in 3 columns. So the entire book all the poems are in 3 columns. And I think that's pretty much all you need to know. So the first poem that I will read is, let me time myself. Hold on one second. Generally try to stay on time. Okay, the first poem I'll read is a poem that I wrote when I was doing a reading in Shanghai and China, and it's called "It Was Raining in the French Concession." It was a thunderstorm or smog or both. All I know is that the particulates glowed and hung like ghosts in the post-human twilight. It was raining in Shanghai, which is the beginning of a tragedy, joke, or poem. And there were lanterns all around Elevator, the nightclub. And the Russian girl, a DJ, was talking about something I couldn't hear much. Oh, she was talking about her podcast, which was about what DJs do during the day when they're not DJing. And on a screen was computerized art that seemed as if the air was not the air, as though you felt that negation was artificial and turning. I think you know what I mean, the way demons turn to look at you or churn out some new cartography. You talked about mansion. No, not the mansion. There was no article. Do you want to know about mansion? I said, not really. I felt self-conscious and distant and thought about my lover 15,000 miles away and texted him that I would visit him soon and told my son I would bring him home a Chinese drone. I wanted desperately to hear something harmonious, but we were inside the topography of the information of feeling. Your veins were circuits and so were mine. Teenagers all around Shanghai go to mansion, losers, the riffraff, dropouts of all sorts. They do drugs and things. Of course they do, I thought. I couldn't hear anything else you said. I do remember saying, but shouldn't they read or plan a revolution or something? They should read more, I agree, you said, but it was too loud to hear anything else. Outside, a guy from Corsica asked, why are you at Elevator? I said, I don't know why I'm at Elevator, and he drank and talked about Corsica's eternal forests. And right then I wanted the eternal forest to hold me close. And later I read on the internet, wildfires sweep Europe as Lucifer heatwave makes its way. It must have been a bad translation. When I got back to the hotel, I thought about the bees rising in the black smoke from Russia, which was in the poem by Han Bo, my friend translated, as the wind blew in the hotel windows and the gridded world unleashed something like steel, teeth, concrete unto me. The curtains were drenched with my sweat, and all night I dreamed about that atmosphere of growth and capital, the percentages, a cross between light and agony. I dreamed so much. When I woke up, there was glass on the floor, and I cut my foot walking to the bathroom as I gulped in the starched night like a pufferfish. The next afternoon, my friend and I walked in the French concession. We passed an old woman selling paper replicas of everything valuable in this world. My friend said, you can buy a paper mansion. You burn it to honor your ancestors. You can buy a paper iPhone, a paper Ferrari, a paper jet, a paper laptop. As he said this, my friend seemed to be pointing to oblivion. She's got a paper everything, a paper yacht. You can burn that. You can buy a paper elevator and burn it, a paper elevator to everyone who came before you. Okay. This poem is called Now Wait for Last Year. Now wait for last year. As in emergence, the triptych played all day, diseased, phantasmagorically, in the car, in the blank categorical, which was work, work, work. Through the deep channels of the grocery store that involved gallons and gallons of orange juice. It played and played. An instrument with neither beginning nor end, letters unraveling in the black strumming beyond ordinary air, so she held on to the gossamer, the viscous transitory that bent history like a frond, that she knew was a warped trap. But why should she care getting an email from the novelist between aisles? You are the spitting image of my dead sister, the woman in the red apron told her and handed her the book her dead sister wrote. At home, she read the book, its new age discombobulations, meticulously following the author's search for Dion Fortune, her painstaking documentation, trips to the UK, interviews with people who knew Dion, letters, etc., but the lamentation or doppelganger or ghost bore no fruit. The Museum of an Extinct Race. Did you know about this? No, I didn't know. Me either. Exorbitant simulacra, not a lie. It's shocking. Hitler wanted to turn the entire city of Prague into this museum. They were cataloging the books and all that. I kind of want to change the channel. No, don't change it yet. I thought the Nazis burned books. They did that too. They cataloged them and burned them. They did both. I fell asleep, fell into stage of entry, dream life half concealed. What was it? Looks at the past and present, sees the same monuments. What doesn't it see? Tablecloths, wine glasses, a sports medal. Progress vanishes with it. Shadow performs infinitely. The sun is left justified, and I am maddening, haunted like cheeks. In 1839, a rage for tortoises overcame Paris. Shortly after, an absolute wonder became part of history. The Crystal Palace. Dream is used 411 times in the Arcades project. History, 348. Divide dream by history, you get convolutions, residues of utopia, the imaginary number E, radicals, negative fractions. News of the palace brought sheer delight to people. Sheet glass, triangular prisms, paths of light through endless panes. The sun is said to murder dreams. I woke with the quest of Dion Fortune in my lap. On the facing page, she had just seen the vulturine devouring of her city. Nothing left but wreckage, meditations, and her black hair in the bombed out atmosphere. I was searching for something too. Was I really her sister? The lifeless? I wanted to love you so much. Okay, let's see. One time. Okay, I still have a little time. Okay, I'm gonna read this poem called Gong, Gong, Gong. Yeah. I haven't read it in a while. So. The man from Paros who lives beyond the temple of Artemis takes a high fever. When they inject me with a cerulean anesthetic, I become the mint I planted between the jasmine and swimming pool. On the 6th day, the man from Paros is delirious. When I wake, the nurse gives me a painkiller. Winter was like spring and spring like winter. On the 8th day, the man from Paros dreams in turquoise of the nodes on the body where sea and sky entwine, dreams of his mother who bakes octopus. I stand up, I faint. On the 10th day, the man from Paros believes he will die and is now very angry at himself for keeping secret his love for a man in the next village, but the man from Paros cannot move and must send a messenger. I get up, ask my husband for the mascara in my purse. On the 16th day, the man from Paros receives no word from his source of Eros. When I return home, I urinate blood. On the 20th day, he has a visionary dream. It is not the world of Greece in 500 BC, but rather our world. Dolphins with plastic in their intestines and ice shelves slamming into the sea, black boys shot in the street, and he tries to explain this to his mother, but she's confused, for what does plastic or gun mean in ancient Greek? Why are the rivers beige? Why is the sea tobacco brown? Why are weeds growing through my palms? I take the pain medicine, start an email to my estranged mother, delete it. On the 24th day, the man from Paros hears back from his love, who has given the messenger one fig. Hippocrates says nothing more about the man except he lived. This is the second column. I cry, Jane Eyre says, because I am miserable. But what could she know of town hall meetings on climate crisis, workflow, the technological sophistication of our new lingo, content strategists, reaching out? Did Miss Eyre reach out to Rochester or to her little friend who died of consumption? Jane held the girl all night, and in the morning she was dead. Calls to action, optimizing, becoming impactful. Jane's world revolved around so little, and yet it was a life. Newest version of the world, hurricanes that obliterate. Investors who come up and buy the islands cheap. I dub thee La T, landlord of the underworld, and you can pick up your laurels at the teller of bones. Baudelaire's family was so annoyed he was a poet, they sent him on a long sea voyage from Calais to Calcutta. He hated everyone on the boat except Jane Eyre. He liked her because she was ugly and read books. A poem, he said to her as they crossed the Horn of Africa, can trip the reel. I refuse anything and everything that is prejudicial to my personal liberty, Jane said. I will have the world, Charles said, or nothing, Jane finished. When they stopped, Jane and Charles found some literary people, smoked hashish, made love again and again, and refused to go on. So they bribed the sea captain and somehow returned to France. A love like this can't fit into cramped medieval streets. Things grow tedious inside sunsets. Why, he wondered, after such a splendid adventure, had Jane fled? Simple. The pleasure of annihilation can only sustain the duration of 3 suns, 3 isometric chords, then gone. I cry, Charles Baudelaire says, because I am miserable. And this is the third column of this poem. We often say the sun is over there. He walked over the hill with a handful of figs. To wander helplessly into the artist's fist, no wonder he couldn't find the king in this painting of the former world. You will feel the ecclesiastical floodplain, clay, heartbreak. Some people with a psychological disorder eat soil, and some in grief pull hair from their head and eat it. In another life, I pulled hair from my head. Grief begins so full of water and ends saying farewell to the sour, wild pears of another island, forsaken, the core shaken. Don't forget rivulets of fluid down your leg after sex, the sensuous smell of musical geraniums after a long rain, 2 owls crisscrossing the green-gray sky. He roamed and roamed. What is growing from my little palm tree? Long, outrageous fronds. Get back to where you belong. Now his back is to the artist, his long scarlet cloak mocking the attenuation. The man with perfect Latin, walking away from a lantern, snake, angel, lark. Remember, my dear, when things weren't so far away from the imagination, when things weren't so far away that the imagination got a crack at it. Something like children whacking a piñata with a baseball bat, candy pouring from the unicorn's torn ribcage. Could this be the golden tree? Now forget the man in the painting. Neuron mapping looks a lot like freeze, thaw, alluvial fans, but knowledge, you know, isn't only info. In Thassos, the wife caught a wicked fever from her grief, wept and laughed, wrapped herself up, sometimes talked of blackberries, alone pulling out her hair. 9th day, random babbling. 14th day, breaths short like the sound of insects. 17th day, inscrutable to everything. 20th day, loss of voice. 21st day, died. Okay, maybe I'll read one more. Just want to find the right one for this very intuitive reading. Kind of random, but okay, this is, I think, a poem of sensual poem. And I wrote this, I was reading Gustav Sobin, whose poems I really love. And yeah, so it's called Poem with 3 Lines from Gustav Sobin, although I don't think there are 3 lines from his, I just like the sound of that title. So this is my last poem. I think I've ever read this one, but here goes. Poem with 3 lines by Gustav Sobin. No hills left to inhale. What was only true of your shiny, happy century. We have twisted the erotic like a rag in antiseptic, our hands chapped, air no longer an orifice. Air no longer an orifice, a liability. Progressing through the political landscape sprayed with pesticide, we grazed as crazed animals inhaling fumes. Who's there? The airstream. And why did you bother coming today? We want mostly to touch each other where sunlight burns through glass, turning us into refracted watery images of poisonous fungi and lust. Ramming your body into mine, just the quickening of text messages where the claimant says, this is a life. And it is somewhat full of various catastrophes, lapping the edge of an old lake of algae. We want mostly to fuck and dangle from ancient arches. We want mostly to bicycle to the bakery and bring back a warm baguette for our lovers. We want mostly to careen into the city and breathe air without a mask between the lips and your body, hot, awkward, and painful. The Whole Foods orchids rebloomed. How I waited patiently 9 months. By then, they had shut down entire nations, eyes lacquered thick with the virus, as other pathogens rose like ghosts from the snowmelt. The pressure pushed my heart, pushed to one side, a force stronger than angst ramming your body into mine became the microscopic telos of these scorpion days. Thank you.
Wow, excellent all around. Thank you, Sandra, for that reading. Thank you, Jessica, for your reading. Thank you, Summer, for attendance. And to our viewers who will be watching this as a recording, thank you. We have some time for a few questions. I also want to say that I have as well put in the links to where you can order these books in the chat. And I guess if I'd like to go first for the question, just because I'm a little bit curious, since, you know, the four of us on this screen actually work together in a poetry cafe that Sandra created. She put out this announcement for it on Facebook right around maybe June of 2020. So the height of the pandemic, I'm in Mississippi. Everything is shut down. I can hear kids playing volleyball outside for some reason, but that's how I remember the early part of the pandemic. And so here's this ray of light to just come and zoom in and talk poetry and meet people who are in these little boxes, but have so much to offer with their thoughts of praise and then their critique for how to make these poems better in the cafe. So my question is, you know, it's obvious that we all value a literary community, but what surprises you most about being members of literary communities?
Well, I think that poetry, I think there's this stereotype. I think it's very masculine, actually. Not to, no offense to men, but like this idea of like a poetic genius working in isolation, and then just sort of coming into the world with some kind of quote unquote masterpiece, and this very highly romanticized idea about art. And you know, for me, and I can only speak for myself, I think that's really just not the way that I've experienced poetry in my life. And, you know, books are not made in a vacuum, and neither are poems. You know, it's true that you write the poems alone to some degree, but it's a conversation, right? Like poetry, literature is a conversation, and it's always a conversation, but for me, between my poetry and other people's poems. So I think in order to keep the conversation going, there has to be exchange. And in order to have a lively conversation, there has to be, I think, people with, you know, we all come from different aspects, different lives, different experiences. And so that, I think, can really, and also just different skill levels in terms of craft. And so I think that can be very helpful, that exchange. I think that's, yeah, I guess that's what I would say for that. So what the surprise, I don't think that's necessarily surprising, but what happens within is often beautiful and important for the art form. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, I don't know if this is necessarily surprising, but part of what I find so interesting about literary communities is that they happen in so many different ways, so many different forms. There are some that, you know, are very purposefully bringing people in the same space at the exact same time, either through Zoom or in like a physical space, so that they're meeting kind of synchronously. But then there's also so many ways that it feels like you're in community, or at least I feel like I'm in community with others, like reading their work or attending, for example, online readings or events, or even in-person ones, even if I don't really know the people, but I'm, know the poets, but I'm there to kind of hear their work and hear how they respond to questions and all of those things that I take with me into my own work all the time. And so many of the ways that I kind of understand myself as a poet is very much in relation to others and what others are doing. And I don't know that there's another way to understand oneself. So that's why I'm not sure if this is necessarily surprising, but it's very interesting to me the way that that can happen, whether or not you're in a kind of community, like a small workshop community where you're actually workshopping work, or whether you're simply attending events. And I feel like one of the things that I'm trying to get more involved in that I miss from the pandemic, kind of shutting everything down, is I miss being able to attend literary events in person. And, it's been a joy just recently to start really doing that again and just be around that energy again, whether I really know the poets or not.
Summer, do you have any thoughts? And also, Summer's Boom House is available for pre-order. And Summer has also been featured as a Teaching Takeaways poet. I think that was August of 2022. So we've just got this magical quartet going on here.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, I mean, I don't know. I guess for me, the community during the pandemic and joining the Poetry Cafe group was really tremendous for me. I come to poetry, my background is in visual arts, so I'm relatively new as a writer. And so I learned a lot from listening to everyone discussing poetry. I mean, I learned a lot of terminology. I just learned a lot. But also during that period of time where we were meeting really regularly, I mean, that was my community. So I was here with my partner and my son and our pets. And then there was the Poetry Cafe, and it was and still is pretty important to me. So, I mean, I don't know that's just more of a thought than anything else.
Thank you. I just have one more question, and I noticed, Jessica, there are ecological themes in your work, and Sandra, there are some ecological themes. I was also writing down orange, palace, elevators, paper, and I'm just interested, and I know, Sandra, you have been teaching a class on confessional poetry. What do you all think about where someone might take this fusion of an eco-confessional poem? What might that look like, especially given the way that the world is really teeming on the brink?
Well, I guess what I would say to that is, I'm sort of generally opposed to branding as a method, like I'm an eco poet or I'm this kind of poet. I mean, my sense is like, of course you would write about ecological collapse because that is literally what we're living in. So for me, it seems, and I'm actually going to teach at Bennington next year a class on eco poetics, and to find poets who are like solely focused on one thing, I think it's actually kind of rare. So then the question is like, what is this bracketing, or why and how are we bracketing people off with these sorts of labels? So yeah, I think it would just, generally speaking, I think these are just, if you're awake, you're writing about this. That's my sense, ditto 5-10 other political ecological, social problems that we have. I mean, I just think that most poets that I respect and care about are, you know, they're writing about the world that they're living in. I don't know about confession. I think that has a kind of historical connotation, but and I think that's a longer conversation about, I mean, I think confessional poetry is essentially infused in most 21st century contemporary writing, except for, you know, except for conceptual kinds of work that is less read and less in the forefront of American poetry right now. So yeah, I think that those two things are evident and prominent in a lot of contemporary poetry, for good reason, right?
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about what it means to kind of brand yourself a particular poet as opposed to simply kind of writing poems that may at some point engage with certain themes. I feel like that's why I can't help but in some ways think of my book as like a collection of what happened to me over a certain number of years, because
Yeah.
in many ways that's really what it feels like it is. I mean, it has a lot of ecological, environmental concerns. Um, it also has, you know, my father passing, and it also has, you know, like reflections on what it was to grow up in a place that people like to vacation, but not like living on the vacation side of it. And I think I still write about those things, but now it's just kind of morphed into things that are more specific to either what I'm experiencing more recently, or like moving to different geographic locations has had a lot of an influence on that. Um, but it also makes me think of poets that, so when I think of an eco poet that I really admire, I think of Brian Tier, who I think is just an incredible poet. And it's so interesting to me because, you know, at the same time that his work is very, I think, focused on sometimes like environmental disasters and things of that nature, it's also incredibly intimate. Like it often is also about like queer love and all of these kind of intimate things between humans. And so it's, you know, I guess that's kind of what I think about. I think about, you know, how it's hard to have one without the other, because what is it to write about, for example, the environment, but then separate ourselves from it, right? Like that also doesn't feel like possible or perhaps even useful, right? So I don't know. I guess those are just some thoughts about it jumbled together.
Great. I appreciate everyone's thoughts and contributions to the discussion. Summer, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to say that I really, really enjoyed listening to both of your readings tonight. Really, really just beautiful work. And I'm so happy to hear you read it. And thank you.
Great. Thank you again, Sandra, Jessica, Summer. It's great to have you here. This concludes the first literary salon of 1 Week Critique. There will be more in the future. Thank you and have a great evening. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Hi,
Thank
thank
you
you so
so
much.
much.